made a decision that, maybe my family would be sad without me, but they'd be better off. And I decided to take my life. I'd sit in my closet in my apartment. I had a Glock 22 pistol, and I put my family pictures on the floor around me and try to build the courage to pull that trigger. And it was one morning, my wife came to my apartment, and she had knocked on the door. I wasn't going to answer it, but I had that pistol in my hand. And when she knocked on the door, she asked me a question that just radically changed my life and saved my life that day. She's like asking me how I could do everything she see me do in the military. And when it comes to your family, you'll quit. And, for me, there's no more soul-cutting word to be called a quitter. And she was absolutely right. I've been successful at all these professional things, but when it came to the most important thing, like being a husband, being a father, being that young 17-year-old kid that raised his hand and made a commitment to do something important, and quitting all those things, including my will to live. And I made a radical decision in that moment to get back in the fight. I didn't know how to do it, but one thing I knew is I couldn't do it alone, and I couldn't do it with the people I surrounded myself by.
Well, welcome to our Culture and Christianity podcast. Just so happens today we're at the tail end of a Culture and Christianity conference here at World Outreach Church in Murfreesboro. It's been a wonderful couple of days, and I have recruited one of my friends to sit in with us, Chad Robichaux. Chad, welcome.
Thanks, Pastor Allen.
I'm going to mess your credentials up, but I know you're a Force Recon Marine.
Yes, sir.
You did 6 tours in Afghanistan?
Did eight tours in Afghanistan as part of a JSOC task force. So
you can tell I'm ignorant about too much of the military, and I apologize for that.
No, you're
plain language. You're a hero.
Well, I would not say that from
No, I know you won't, but I will. I'll be happy to say that. After we withdrew from Afghanistan in such a shameful way,
yes, sir,
we abandoned a man who had been a great help to you.
Yeah.
And you recruited some friends and went back to get him.
That's right. Aziz, Aziz had served all my deployments with me. He was not only my interpreter, but my teammate, and ultimately he was my friend. He saved my life multiple times, and he's just an incredible human being and a hero to America, even though he had never been here.
Amen.
And there was no way I could sit back on my couch and watch us leave him behind. He would have certainly been killed, him, his wife, and 6 kids. And so we went back to get him.
So the active military couldn't help you, so you had to recruit some buddies that were retired?
Yeah, we put together a team of about a dozen former special operations guys who were out of the military and had the unique skill sets to do that kind of operation. And originally it started just to get Aziz's wife and his 6 kids. And like I said, Aziz not only saved my life, but like when I wasn't operating out in the mountains of Afghanistan, I was at his home. I held his kids when they were born, so they're family to me, and it was very important to me that he get out safe. And so I had some amazing friends that agreed to help. But as we started preparing to go help him, one of our teammates got a text message of these 3,000 orphans that had just been abandoned into withdrawal, because everyone was just getting out of there. So people that would have been running an orphanage would have been leaving to save their life, and they left these 3,000 kids. And so at that moment, we all kind of looked at the situation and said, hey, let's just lean forward, and we're all believers. We believe God was burdened our hearts to help, but we had this tremendous experience on our team. Let's help as many Americans, interpreters, their families, women and children. Let's just help as many people as we can. And we gotten a lot of credit for it since, but the truth is, and I keep saying this, and it's the only way I know how to explain it. People are like, how'd you guys pull off rescuing Aziz, his family, and ultimately, the 17,000 people? How'd you guys pull that off? And
that was 17,000 people, right? Okay, I wanted to be sure.
The only way I could explain it is it was a God ordained miracle. Like, I'm not smart enough or logistically capable enough, and I don't believe anyone is, to pull off what it actually pulled off. There was a series of events that took place that allowed that to happen. That is nothing other than divine in nature.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for modeling that for us. My opinion, I'm certainly not a military expert or a global strategist, but I think that expression of weakness in the way we withdrew from Afghanistan, abandoned the sacrifices that had been made, left all of the hardware there, was the signal that has resulted in so much of what we've seen since then, all the way up to October 7th.
Yeah. I mean, the world is, burning down because of it. I mean, Afghanistan, if we could pause there for a second, it's Bagram Air Force Base is the most strategic place in the globe between Iraq, Iran, Russia, and China. The American people have been lied to say that we are in this 20-year war, this endless war, and we have to pull out. American sons and daughters are dying. We could have declared a victory in the war on terror and kept the presence there. 2,500 troops is what we had there. At the exact time of withdrawal, it was about 4,000. But I can name a dozen places around the world that we have the equal amount of troops. In fact, since World War II, we still have 80,000 troops in Japan, 40,000 in Germany, 35,000 in South Korea on the 38th parallel to keep the North Koreans from coming across. So keeping military contingents in places like Afghanistan isn't prolonged wars, preventing wars, creating stability. And anybody that understands military strategy knows this. We had the entire international community supporting a support and advisory role to the Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police, and it was working effectively. And so when we left the way we left without, by the way, they dumped the Bagram prison with all the ISIS-K Taliban fighters, dumped them in the civilian population, closed Bagram Air Force Base, left $80 billion in equipment there before we moved our civilians out even. So even if I'm wrong on the withdrawal, you don't do that. And they handed the NEO operation, non-combatant evacuation operation, over to the State Department. So it's handled politically and not militarily. And it created this catastrophe that left thousands of Americans in Afghanistan to either be killed or lost. We don't know where all of them are now. And we left tens of thousands of our allies. And so not only was it a catastrophe of what we did in Afghanistan and then leaving 40 million Afghan people to suffer, 20 million women and little girls to be sexually enslaved, but we sent a statement to the world that we will buckle under the pressure of our enemies. And that pressure in Afghanistan didn't come from the Taliban. It came from China. China wanted the U.S. military out of Afghanistan for the mineral rights in the Hindu Kush Mountains. And I was called a conspiracy theorist for saying it on Fox News, but we left on August 30th and September 1st, China had the mineral rights to trillions of dollars of worth of lithium in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Additionally, China wanted to be able to move sanctioned oil from Iran to China through Afghanistan, but they couldn't do it with the U.S. military there. And they started doing that in September as well. So we were bullied by our enemies to leave, and the world took note. Why did Putin put 100,000 troops on the eastern Ukrainian border and flex? He wanted to see what Biden would do. And he had already seen what we did in Afghanistan. And what did Biden do? He took out the troops from Ukraine. He closed our embassy and consulate, and the rest of the world followed and did the same. And that gave a green light for Putin to move into Ukraine. Putin would have never moved into Ukraine if the U.S. military would have kept the troops there. And people would argue and say, well, there was only 160 troops there. It doesn't matter if there's one. Article 5 of NATO says if they injure, even indiscriminately or unintentionally injure a U.S. service member or a NATO service member, Article 5 violation. Putin is a lunatic. He's evil, but he's not stupid. He would have not done that. And so we gave him the green light to do it. Now you see October 7th, and what happened there. Iran, firing rockets into Israel, and with money that we're giving them still. I mean, there's just zero consequences in the world. And when America is weak, the world is a dangerous place, and it's an unstable place. And that's what we're seeing right now.
That is a frightening chain of events you just described, that our withdrawal from Afghanistan was because of Chinese pressure or when you desire to give China an opportunity. When
you look at any scenario and you can't figure out where what's the who's responsible for this. You look at motive, right? And who benefits most. And the Taliban, got a country, but the Taliban's really not a player. They're a puppet in this.
Right.
The United States, America didn't benefit. Our national security is jeopardized because of it. Afghanistan didn't benefit. None of our allies benefited. The only people that benefited from this is Iran, Pakistan, ISI, and China. And China is the one that benefits most. Bagram Air Force Base, that strategic base that we gave up and all the equipment there, China occupies that base now.
And then within weeks of that, if we didn't outright initiate, we invited the war between Ukraine and Russia.
Absolutely. And again, there's the thought that we might have initiated it, which I would not, there's so much speculation to be made there, but I would lean on the side of that. Our hands are all over that. When I say our hands, I mean the White House. It's a money making and money laundering machine. And there's a lot of people that are sending billions of dollars to Ukraine that have the ability to end that thing in 24 hours. And, but the incentive is to end it would be, the people that are actually making the money, they would have to be incentivized to end it or not. Zelensky's not going to end it. President Biden's not going to end it. They're all benefiting from this thing. And so, I believe that it was very deliberate to remove the U.S. troops and close our embassy and consulate to give that green light for Putin to cross. And
so there's been more than 500,000 casualties, right?
Yeah, I would say a minimum, and there's those are very rough estimations because you can't go. There's no journalists that are going into the Eastern Front, but I've been to places like, so I'd say that's a minimum number. Is probably 500,000 casualties in there, and the civilian casualties are grotesque. I mean, I've been to Kharkiv and Odessa and all in the front line, Izum, and personally witnessed seeing apartment buildings, 10-story apartment buildings blown down to rubble. That no men would have been there. Most fighting age males would have not been there. Right. There's no military targets there. Neighborhoods that are like elderly neighborhood. It's just so eerie going there because you're going there and this is not a third world country. I've been to a lot of war zones, but going there to a place like where we live with ice cream parlors and pizza shops and malls, they're just leveled and apartment buildings leveled. And I personally have eyewitnessed and reported, like leaked to Fox News, mass graves of civilians, women and children, hands bound behind their backs and executed and pushed into mass graves, 1,400 of them. And so the atrocities on the battlefield there are real. Those are not propaganda. Those are real.
And this isn't theory. You've been there, 10 times?
I've been there 10 times. Mighty Oaks as a team has been there 30 times. So we've done 30 trips through Mighty Oaks Foundation.
So this is firsthand experience. And then we hear the government telling us, I haven't heard any calls for a humanitarian ceasefire in Ukraine. We just keep funneling billions of dollars in weapons.
That's right.
But in Israel, when they're attacked by Hamas and innocent civilians are brutally murdered, all of a sudden we're self-righteous and we need a humanitarian ceasefire.
Yeah, it's so inconsistent. And you just look at the motivations behind that. I mean, for me, when I say Ukraine can be ended in 24 hours, that's exactly how you do it. A humanitarian ceasefire. You move NATO troops in, not to go fight with the Russians, but to provide humanitarian aid to the civilian casualties and the war atrocities and war crimes conducted against civilians in Ukraine. Once the U.S. and NATO troops move in there, now Putin has risk of a Article 5 violation. There will be a line set somewhere. And that line will hold as long as those troops and the troops that just stay there and remain in doing a humanitarian effort. And that essentially ends the Ukrainian conflict. But it would cost the people that are profiting off it billions of dollars. And that's why those are the same people that have the ability to make that choice. And then you see in Israel, that's what they call for right away because the script, the story's kind of a flip script.
Different set of powers there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you surprised by the anti-Semitism, the hatred being expressed towards the Jewish people across this nation now?
It hurts. It's shocking, but it's not surprising because, we're in the Culture and Christianity Conference. We've seen our culture just so lied to, manipulate it, and manipulate it over the last 20, 30 years that it's, the fact that we got here where we are now is should not be surprising. I mean, the misinformation that's being pumped into our youth through schools and universities and it's not surprising at all.
Right.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's not surprising.
Yeah. Tragically, we can explain it.
Yeah. It's
happened on our watch while we were diddling and weren't paying any attention.
Right.
And we're going to have to wake up and create a new future or we're going to lose our freedom and liberty.
We certainly will. It has reached that point to where it's on our freedom and liberties. Is at a breaking point.
Yeah, I think we're on life support.
Yeah.
You, after you retired from the military, that's kind of a theory, but you founded the Mighty Oaks Foundation. Yeah. You understood the trauma of coming back and kind of re-entering civilian life.
That's right.
And I mean, only God got you through that. So you put together the Mighty Oaks Foundation to help the other people coming back that are struggling. Can you tell us a little bit about Mighty Oaks?
Yeah, when I came home, I was dealing with anxiety, depression, debilitating panic attacks. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and I spent about 3 years in a downward spiral that ended with me almost losing my family in a very real attempt to take my life. But
from the outside, you look pretty successful.
Sure, yeah.
You were an MMA fighter, world champion.
Yeah, I got home and I did, to cope and deal with that, I dove into a sport I did my whole life. I was, been a martial artist since I was 5 years old. I was already a professional MMA fighter on the side. So I dove into that as a coping mechanism, which isn't bad for you, by the way. It's good to have physical outlets and hobbies, but I took something that was good for me and I abused it and I never actually got well. And so on the surface, I'm, winning fights. I'm ranked number 6 in the world. I won a world championship and I'm ended up being 18-2 as a professional fighter. So on the surface, it looked like I was extremely successful, but underneath that really false facade of success was a very broken person in a home that was falling apart, and my wife and I's marriage was falling apart, and I was in relationships with other women, and eventually we decided to divorce and sold our home, and that there was 3 months that we were apart in separate homes, and we had sold our home and was in separate apartments. And during that time, I had made a decision that maybe my family would be sad without me, but they'd be better off, and I decided to take my life. And I'd sit in my closet in my apartment. I had a Glock 22 pistol, and I put my family pictures on the floor around me and try to build the courage to pull that trigger. And it was one morning, my wife came to my apartment, and she had knocked on the door. I wasn't going to answer it, but I had that pistol in my hand. And when she knocked on the door and announced herself, and I heard her voice, I panicked. I was so ashamed of what I was doing. I actually hid that gun under a blanket, and I went to the door. It may sound twisted, but I was so mad that she was there interrupting me killing myself. It would sound silly, but I was. And I opened the door, started berating her, yelling at her why she was there. She wouldn't leave. It's a shame to say this, but because I've never been physically abusive in my life, even though I've definitely been verbally abusive, but I grabbed her purse from her, and I just wanted her to leave so bad that I grabbed it, took it from her, and threw it over the balcony because I wanted her to leave so bad, because I didn't want her interrupting me in that moment. And I remember stuff flew everywhere. And she's not a very calm arguer, by the way, but she's the opposite. I'm usually calm, and she's not. But in that moment, she was like so calm, and she asked me a question that just radically changed my life and saved my life that day. She's like asking me how I could do everything she see me do in the military, going to special operations, the schools, the training, the deployments, training for fights, like the discipline that it takes to do all those things. She's like, how could you do all those things, and when it comes to your family, you'll quit? And, for me, there's no more soul cutting word to be called a quitter. And she was absolutely right. I've been successful at all these professional things, but when it came to the most important thing, like being a husband, being a father, being that young 17-year-old kid that raised his hand and made a commitment to do something important, and quitting all those things, including my will to live. And I made a radical decision in that moment to get back in the fight, but I didn't know how to do it. But one thing I knew is I couldn't do it alone, and I couldn't do it with the people I surrounded myself by, because I had surrounded myself by people that told me everything I wanted to hear and not what I needed to hear. And so she was going to this church when we were separated. I didn't care about her church. I didn't care about God, but I wanted someone outside of my circle that would help hold me accountable to this decision. And I asked her to contact some man at this church. And I met this man named Steve Toth. We sat just like we are right now at a Starbucks coffee shop, and I wrote a 5-paragraph order, like a military operations order, of how I was going to fix my life. And it was really good. And I was super proud of it. And I slid it over to Steve, because what I wanted was him to show it to Kathy, so I could like win her back, impress her, and I would sweep everything in the rug and move forward. But he didn't even look at it. He just slid it back over to me and told me I was going to fail. And I remember he tapped on that paper and he said, "This plan doesn't have anything to do with your relationship with God. I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not going to let you waste mine." And I had tried everything at that time. I'd been through medication, counseling, had professional success, financial success. I'd rebuilt notoriety. My ego was rebuilt, like all those things. And some of those things were good. Some of those things were bad, but none of those things changed my situation. And at Mighty Oaks, we have a saying that kind of comes from that moment. If what you're doing isn't working, then why not try something different? So everything I tried didn't work. It was time to try something different. I gave God a chance and surrendered my life to Jesus. And
so God restoring a life is not a theory to you or some theological point. You've lived it out.
I lived it out. And beyond the decision, though, Steve discipled me for an entire year in biblical living.
That's good.
And that was the change, because what I realized that all this bad stuff that happened to me was not because of my experiences, but because of the choice I made in response to my experiences. And now the Bible gave me a blueprint to make better choices. So did I still get anxiety and depression? Of course I did, but I had a blueprint to make better choices. People say life doesn't come with a handbook. And it actually does. We just don't read it.
Isn't that the truth?
It's kind of like the IKEA furniture. You ever see that? Like my wife will buy something and I'll get it and I'll put it together without reading instructions. And it's like 5 extra parts and it's like wobbly and shaky. I'm like, this thing's junk. It's not. I didn't read the instructions, and it's kind of our life. Our life ends up being junk, and we just never read the handbook. And so reading the Bible and figuring out biblical solutions to the problems I was facing led me to restoration and hope and ultimately purpose. And that purpose really manifested for me, and God just putting a burden on my heart to pay that everything I just said forward to someone else. And that led to Mighty Oaks Foundation. I didn't know if it was going to be one person, and now we're about 500,000 people.
That's awesome.
In 12 years. But I just didn't know. I just leaned.
So if somebody's listening, they're a veteran, or their family member's a veteran, or somebody they care about, and they're struggling a bit.
And first responders.
First responders, they can reach out to Mighty Oaks.
They can reach out, mightyoaksprograms.org. We cover everything. Our programs are 6-day intensives at our different ranches in California, Ohio, Virginia, and Texas. And we even pay for the flights. So there's no strings attached. We'll get you there. A grateful nation loves you and provides support to Mighty Oaks to make it possible for us to. And these programs are non-clinical, faith-based, peer-to-peer. So all of our instructors have come through our program as alumni, and we disciple them to be leading. So it's peer-to-peer, which is very powerful.
We're doing a Mighty Oaks group of some kind here.
You guys are. You got Larry and Maples and some other folks came through Mighty Oaks, and you can start an outpost here. And that's, this is one of the things that we do. Is not just our intensive, but partner with churches like World Outreach across the country to make sure the communities have resources and are equipped to be able to care for their veterans and first responders.
That is so good. You got a new book coming out. I want to hear a little bit about that. It's called Mission Without Borders.
Mission Without Borders. It is based in Ukraine during the Ukrainian invasion by Russia, but it's not a geopolitical Ukraine book. It does give some of that. What the book's really about is me and my sons. My oldest son Hunter is a combat veteran Marine, 84 years of service in our family. So, but Hunter and I are kind of unique because we both served in Afghanistan. And but even though he's his own man, he's a Marine combat veteran, I'm still his dad. And I still love him and want to protect him. And so there was this transition for me of like him God burdening his heart's the same thing as me to go into war zones and help people. He's just burdened to do that. But me being dad saying, I can't take you into Eastern Ukraine with me. Like what kind of dad takes his son into a war zone? And my fear and my control saying, I'm going to protect him. And me coming to the realization that the hard realization that I can protect my son, but I can never protect him better than God can. And I can love, and I love my son, but I don't love him more than God does. And realization to be able to take that control off and relinquish that fear I have in the faith in him and his abilities and the faith in God to protect him and have his hand over his life and allow him to do the things that God called him to do too. Cause he didn't just call me to do these things. He's calling him instead to get out of my son's way. And so into the beginning of the book starts with me and him and both at the same time. I'm in a Zoom. He's in Bakhmut getting bombed. And that's kind of the prologue of the book is we're both getting bombed simultaneously at the same time. And we're on the phone with each other. And then the book kind of goes back to the beginning where we're going to this Ukrainian operation and I'm benching him. I'm not letting him do anything. And how do we get to not letting him do anything to where we're both getting bombed? And now he's been to Ukraine more times than I have. And one of the missions he's leading there is not rescuing people. One of the things he's doing is they're training chaplains. So most of the Ukrainian soldiers are conscripts, people that were recruited or drafted into the army. Well, they're pastors. Like that's happened here. And you had half of your congregation, the men are out fighting. They don't have a chaplain. You might say, hey, I want to go be their chaplain, but you have no idea how to be a chaplain. Right. And so we came in as Mighty Oaks and worked with the Ukrainian military.
Well, that's cool.
And we've trained 300 chaplains now of how to not to be a burden on the battlefield and how to actually be a chaplain. So Mighty Oaks was so he's led that. And like I said, I think there are about just over 300 chaplains now that we've trained and certified and launched out.
That is awesome. I actually thought of you a couple of weeks ago. I was in Israel and we were down on the border of Gaza and the Israeli artillery was still firing. And I'm hearing those sounds. I thought, now I know those sounds are being made by my friends, so that's not quite as scary. But I thought, I'm not as courageous as Chad, so I appreciate what you have done on behalf of this nation and for people. Well,
I'm not thankful you had that experience, but in a way I am that you could hear and see and feel it because it gives you a perspective that it's just that a lot of people here just don't have. And
freedom's not free.
It's not. It comes at cost of lives. And, in America, since 1775, I say 1775 because it's a Marine Corps year, 1775, every, man and woman that's donned the uniform and fought, bled, and died for our country, through death, through injury, through losing their hearts and souls and minds, it comes at a heavy price. And that's one of the things at Mighty Oaks, we're here to kind of reconcile that and get these guys not just well again, but back living again, have purpose again.
Absolutely flourishing.
Flourishing. I talked about that in my message this morning here is to Reed Hasty. If you remember Reed Hasty not being able to fly from Oklahoma to California to go for our program. 8 years later, he's the outpost in Oklahoma, like this one, 350 men a week meet. And in only 8 years, he's got 350 people a week meeting and then going to the Ukraine. Couldn't fly from Oklahoma to California to go to our program because his anxiety was so bad. Now he goes all the way to Eastern Ukraine to share his testimony with those troops. It's amazing to see that kind of transformation.
That is awesome. Well, our commitment on this podcast is to be sure we always talk a bit about what we can do.
Yeah.
And when I'm with you, I'm reminded that our military is not intended to be an exercise in social experiments.
That's right.
They're to defend this nation. And tragically, they've lost their way. Without trying to assign blame to that, I think what we can do now is begin to pray on a daily basis that we'll have leadership in this nation at every necessary level, that our military can be returned to their purpose and stop this insanity that's being pumped into them. Is that fair?
That's fair. I mean, look, the military exists for one reason and one reason only. That's
In the silence, I hear your voice, whispers in the dark, a haunting choice to surrender, to let go, and let our love take control. I'm lost in your haze where the lights are low, drowned in the depths of your eyes. I'm ready to go. In the shadows we'll find our way. Through the night our love will stay. Your touch, a spark that sets me free, a melody that echoes wild and carelessly. In your eyes, a stormy sea, where I'll swim lost eternally. I'm lost in your haze where the lights are low, drowned in the depths of your eyes. I'm ready to go. In the shadows we'll find our way. Through the night our love will stay. You'll taste the sun, we'll chase the night. Our love a flame that burns so bright. In the darkness we'll find our light, and our love will ignite. I'm lost in your haze where the lights are low, drowning in the depths of your eyes. I'm ready to go. In the shadows we'll find our way. Through the night our love will stay. In your love I'm lost, I'm found. In your heart my hope is bound. Forever I'll be yours, you'll be mine. Lost in your haze our love will shine. In your love I'm lost, I'm found. In your heart my home is bound. Forever I'll be yours, you'll be mine. Lost in your haze our love will shine.
protect our nation and our national security and defend people around the world who can't defend themselves. That's why our military exists. And you know, who goes in the military should be who's most qualified to do that. Not who's most woke, not who's, aligns with the new gender ideology of the day. It's who's most qualified to do that. And we should not be making decisions that prohibit that from being the most successful scenario possible. And that's what our military is facing right now. And we're seeing this become a national security issue because the re-enlistments are down. We've never had since Vietnam, since the draft, we've not had a worse enlistment. We're down, we're 25% down on recruiting, and they're fudging the numbers, by the way. And so it's worse than that. And I've never seen a lower morale in 30 years of me being around the military. Suicide rates right now are an all-time high in the military. It's a tough place to be in the military. And when this all start, since 1776, every U.S. service member was issued a Bible, and that stopped in 2009. President Obama stopped that. A lot of people don't know that. And that's when, and I've been around the military for 30 years, and that's when I seen the decline shift in the military. Now, if somebody don't want a Bible, that's fine. But we certainly, if you're a prisoner, you could get one, right? But if you're a United States service member, you can't. Since
that's wrong. It's just wrong.
Yeah.
Well, my guest today is Chad Robichaux, an American hero. I know you won't say it, I will. Thank you for all you've done for us.
Yes,
and
sir.
for those of us listening, we know what we can do. We can start to pray on a daily basis for those who are standing watch on our behalf, that they wouldn't be subjected to some sort of bizarre social experiment, but they would be set free to do what they volunteered to do. And that's put themselves in harm's way so that liberty and freedom can flourish in our nation and be extended to the peoples of the world. If God said he's a warrior and that he's the Lord of the angel armies, we need to pray on a daily basis for those men and women standing guard on our behalf.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chad.
Yes, sir.
Hey, thanks for joining me today. Before you go, please like the podcast and leave a comment so more people can hear about this topic too. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to Alan Jackson Ministries YouTube channel and follow the Culture and Christianity podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast. Together, let's learn how to lead with our faith and change our culture. I'll see you next time.